live long and prosper. So in this video series, I'm going to be talking through the social justice elements of every episode of the original series of Star Trek. The thing that inspired this project was actually a Fox News article which argued that Star Trek has in some way betrayed its traditional commitment to sort of political neutrality or middle ground by embracing progressive politics. In this series, we're going to see that Star Trek has always embraced progressive politics, and it's always been aspirational for social justice in various senses. I am taking a broad perspective on social justice here, so that may include multiple different types of social justice, whether that's racial, whether that's economic, whether that's religious, whether that's abilities, gender and sexuality, anything broadly considered. I will go through every episode. Some of the episodes I will interview fellow Trekkies and talk with them about it. And then below, in the descriptions, I will give you additional information about the episodes, particularly their original air date, who wrote the screenplay, and who directed that episode. I also want to dedicate this series to my dad, Michael Allen Zapkin. He was an OG Trekkie from back in the day, and it was watching the original series with him that I came to love Star Trek. In this video, we're going to talk about the episode Shore Leave. So basically what happens in this episode is that the crew of the Enterprise finds an idyllic planet. Trees, grass, lakes, flowers, etc., etc. No plant or animal, or no animal life, no refined metal, no energy signatures, none of that kind of stuff on the whole planet. And they're like, this looks great for shore leave. Until, on a scouting party, Dr. McCoy sees a large white rabbit with a yellow waistcoat and a gold watch, and then a small blonde girl who is following him. This is the start of a series of improbable events in which the crew finds a revolver that they've always wanted. In the case of Sulu, also Sulu meets a samurai. Birds show up, tigers show up. People from 15 years in Kirk's past show up. His nemesis from the academy, and an old girlfriend. Don Juan shows up and attacks one of the yeomen. A medieval knight shows up and lances McCoy in the chest, etc., etc. Just crazy shit going on. And it turns out at the end of the episode, when Kirk and Spock work out that whatever it is that someone is thinking about becomes reality on this planet. And so Kirk basically orders everybody to just stand at attention and not think about anything. At which point, I'm going to call him Walt Disney, even though Walt Disney was a horrendous anti-Semite, and I'm not a fan of the Disney Corporation. Hashtag not sponsored. But this guy comes out, again, I'm going to call him Walt Disney, and Walt is basically like, hey, sorry that you didn't understand what was going on, but this is our, amusement park planet where our race comes. We're, super advanced, but we need to just chill out sometimes, so we come to this place. We've got super advanced manufacturing facilities underground, whatever we can think of, or whatever you guys can think of, we just make immediately. So, it's a lot of fun. And Kirk's like, well, McCoy is dead. Also, this other chick is dead, but nobody really seems to give a fuck about her. And the guy's like, no, he's fine. And then McCoy comes out with these two burlesque dancers on his arms, much to the chagrin of Yeoman Barrows, who McCoy has been rather unprofessionally flirting with the entire episode. So, interestingly enough, Yeoman Barrows is like, hit the bricks, burlesque dancers. And McCoy sends one of them over to Sulu, played by George Takei, who's gay, and sends the other over to Spock, who has really no romantic or sexual life to speak of for most of the show. Spock is like, I'm gonna leave because this all sucks, and I don't have any interest in making up craziness. So Spock then gives the other burlesque dancer to Sulu. So the gay actor ends up with two women. Well done, George Takei, I guess. And so that's sort of the end of it, is like, it's this planet where whatever they want can be manufactured instantly, so they can have adventures, they can have romance, they can have peaceful, I don't know, they could have, like, Athenian deities or Greek deities feeding them grapes and playing the lute, or whatever it is that they want, they can have. So, there's a couple of social justice things I think that are interesting here. One more minor and one more major. The more minor one is a question of, in contemporary parlance, believing survivors, essentially. At first, when McCoy reports that he's seen a large white rabbit with a yellow waistcoat and a pocket watch, and then a small blonde girl following that rabbit, there is a certain degree of understandable incredulity, right? All of their surveys and stuff have said no animal life, which incidentally is actually, that's going to be my third one. There's a third one there. Third social justice element. So, but all other instruments have said no animal life, no refined metals, nothing like this. It seems reasonable that from the ship, Kirk and Spock are like, that seems not right. But then Kirk goes down, and they find the tracks of the rabbit and the girl. But the more interesting one is that one of the first interactions on this planet is Yeoman Barrows gets attacked by Don Juan, who rips her shirt, blouse, uniform thing. And she screams. McCoy and Kirk come running from where they are. They find her uniform ripped, crying against a tree. And Kirk is like, are you sure you didn't imagine it? Now, Kirk has already more or less come to accept the existence of this large rabbit. I think there's a pattern of skepticism here, but when you come up to someone on a crazy planet where stuff is happening that couldn't possibly be happening, her uniform is ripped, and she's crying, and she says, Don Juan attacked me. She may be wrong about who it was. It may not have been Don Juan, even though that's who she was thinking of, and we get that sort of confirmed. But the idea that she just made it up doesn't really make any sense. So there's that element of, like, the systematic doubting of survivors, particularly of rape or sexual assault, is a huge problem. And it's part of the reason why, at least in the US, as little as half of rapes and sexual assaults are actually reported to the authorities. So we've got that element of it. The second one is actually an ecological one. This is the one that I added in. And I don't know if this is so much a social justice issue, but it's a weird thing that occurred to me as I was rewatching this episode. And it's ecological in the sense that there are some connections with what's currently going on with climate crisis on this planet. If there's no animal life on this planet, it seems extremely unlikely that you would have large amounts of vegetation. Maybe you would. I don't know. I'm not a, paleobotanist or whatever it is, but it seems relatively unlikely to me, because the thing is, seeds are very often spread by pollinators, whether that's insects or birds, or seeds will be carried in the fur of animals and then sort of drop off, etc., etc. For our contemporary, and again, this is maybe reflecting my ignorance of how early flora worked on planet Earth prior to the evolution of things like insects. But contemporary ecosystems really kind of depend on pollinators, which is why the collapse of bee populations is a huge concern for environmentalists, for biologists, etc., etc. Because if the bees go extinct, that actually poses a huge problem for the continuation of plant life on Earth. And the plants look very similar. I mean, realistically, they just sort of shot this in a park on Earth, so that's why stuff looks very similar. But I don't know. If you're a paleobotanist or a botanist at all, or an environmentalist or biologist or whatever it is, you can put a comment down below explaining how wrong I am about this. But it seems to me extremely unlikely that you would have this well-developed Earth park-like environment on a planet with no pollinators. I don't know. So again, in terms of like the social justice element, there's an there's an eco element to this, with the destruction of pollinator populations through things like pesticides and chemicals used for farming, etc., etc. Now, what I actually think is the biggest social justice element here is a critique of capitalism, particularly American-style capitalism. Because at the end of the episode, when Walt Disney comes out, he essentially says, because we are so advanced, because we're so smart, we're such a developed species, we needed this amusement park planet in order to play. And I forget who it is. I forget which one of the characters it is. I think it's McCoy, or possibly Kirk, who says, the more advanced the mind, the greater the need for play. Now, I actually have a bit of a problem with that formulation, because it kind of implies the opposite, that less advanced minds have less need for play, and I actually don't think that's true at all. I think everybody has a need for play. Everybody has a need to detach from work and from stress and things like this, to do things. And I'm not necessarily convinced that things like watching sports or sort of low engagement sitcoms or reality shows or things like this are necessarily a good substitute for this. I actually kind of agree with somebody like Oscar Wilde, who argued that human existence should involve things like an appreciation of the arts, like intellectual conversation. These things that take you out of yourself and your own sort of limited experience in the world, particularly your experience of work in the world. Because as human beings, we aren't just machines. We aren't just workers. We aren't just cogs, etc., etc. And we actually have this setup at the beginning of Shore Leave, because Kirk is refusing to take shore leave. And Spock actually has to trick him into agreeing to it by... We don't know if he actually went and got McCoy's notes or if he just sort of made this up, but it seems reasonable that McCoy had some notes on Kirk's condition. And basically, Spock is like, there's a crew member who their reaction time is down, their critical thinking scores are down, they're becoming irritable, and they're refusing to take shore leave. They don't have to, but... And Kirk is like, that crew member's rights end when when it threatens the ship. That's actually a really interesting point as well, because that is a very contentious position in contemporary U.S. society. We saw that with the COVID-19 pandemic, where so many people refused to wear masks or refused to get vaccinated because of their individual rights, regardless of how detrimental that act might be for others. So that's an interesting point. I mean, I'm not going to talk too much about that. But, so Kirk basically gets Oedipused. Not in the sense that he sleeps with his mother, in the sense that in Oedipus the King by Sophocles, Oedipus says, I will find out who it is that's caused the plague, and that person will be banished. Kirk basically says, whoever that crew person is, whoever that crew member is, they will be taking shore leave. And Spock says, great, enjoy your shore leave, Captain. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that Kirk is in that sort of American capitalist moment of, I'm going to continue working. I don't need a break. I can't take a break. I need to continue and continue and continue working. And this is one of the things, like, in the US, I know there are people who watch this channel from other countries, other cultures. In the US, there's a sort of fetishization of being busy. Like, I know this is true in academia. I think this is true as well in some other spheres, other businesses, things like this. But very often when you ask someone how they are in the US, they will tell you how busy they are, how many things they are doing. And in a way, that is, again, this sort of fetishization. It's, I have to be busy. I have to be perceived as being busy continually, because that is the implicit demand of American capitalism. This is neoliberal capitalism, or late capitalism at its finest. This idea that your time has no value unless it is financially productive or economically productive. And so, the idea of resting, the idea of having time that is legitimately your own, is substantially eroded. I mean, one of the great things about the labor movement, the union movement, particularly under industrial capitalism, was an 8-hour workday, 8 hours for yourself, 8 hours for sleeping. That notion, that idea of structuring the day so that the boss got only a limited part of your time, has very much been eroded in the 21st century, particularly because all of us are constantly on email. So many of us, so many people work in the gig economy where you have to continue going forever and ever and ever in order to make ends meet, etc., etc. And so, in this sense, this idea of shore leave, that not only can you take a break, but you should take a break. You should take yourself out of that space of work and enter a space of fantasy, a space where your mind can exercise, but it's not oriented toward a productive economic or financial goal. That's really I think, an extremely important challenge to contemporary capitalism.